Can you please take that off?
No.
Why?
This is what I wear every day.
Take it off. Dad, I'm doing the interview. Just take it off.
I have a right as the interviewee to wear what I want to. I could say blackface, but...
You're ridiculous.
Would you have supported Reagan in the election of 1980? If so, why? Were you frustrated with Carter?
Yes, I would have supported Reagan in the election in 1980 because of all the economic problems that were happening in the United States, and including President Carter's failed attempts to bring the Iranian hostage crisis to an end. It ended in disaster, and it made the United States look really bad in the world's eyes. So Reagan would have been my choice.
I did support him because I was frustrated with Carter.
I was a junior in high school in 1980, so I couldn't vote, but if I could have voted, I most likely would have voted for Jimmy.
What was your initial reaction to the discovery of AIDS? Did you know someone who had the disease? How did people around you act?
When I first heard about AIDS, it was in the early 1980s, and I really didn't know what it was or understand it, so I couldn't act any differently because it was just another disease that they came up with. And as time went on, I learned more about it, and it was a pretty scary situation.
Reaction to the discovery of AIDS probably wasn't what most people had, because I knew somebody who had it. I was more felt bad for people, and I was worried that how people would deal with such a horrible disease, and people were extremely scared and afraid, and there was a lot of bias going on. My sister was very sick at the time, and that was the only thing that we could figure out that must be wrong with her. After all the testing came back, that was negative for leukemia and cancers and so on and so forth. So my experience with it was very different than most people's. I dealt with a lot of fear, a lot of people who didn't want to be around our family, including my own family members who were cousins or aunts or uncles, neighbors who would talk about it not knowing that my sister was dying from it, work employees who would say things about not wanting to be near somebody, people who didn't want to drink out of the same cup as my sister, were afraid to have her sit in the same chair. So there was a lot of things that happened when HIV and AIDS first came about.
To the best of my knowledge, people didn't talk about AIDS.
Do you believe that Star Wars was a good plan? Did you fear a nuclear war at any point?
I don't believe that Star Wars was a good plan because it was just too far-fetched, and the fear of nuclear war was something from the history books in the 50s and 60s. So Star Wars was just so way out there that it was hard for most people to comprehend.
What exactly is Star Wars?
Star Wars is a missile defense system based in space to shoot down missiles coming from other countries using satellites and other technology that orbited the Earth.
Yes, I believe it was a good plan, and yes, I did fear nuclear war, and I still do.
Why?
Because there's too many hot tempers, people are too quick to overreact. The school diplomacy is gone.
At the time I heard about the Star Wars program, like many other people, I knew it was going to cost a lot of money. I didn't know, or if it ever could be technologically possible. Remember, this was the 1980s when this program was announced. I didn't know anything about the technology. It seemed a little far-fetched to me.
Did you fear a nuclear war?
Did I fear nuclear war? I feared a nuclear war when I was in like 7th, 8th, 9th grade. I think that was the time when things were, relations between the United States and the Soviet Union were really bad. But don't remember fearing a nuclear war in the early 1980s for whatever reason.
Did you do any drills in school?
When I was like in kindergarten, first grade, we used to do the shelter drills. So we'd all have to line up in the hallway and sit down and our head between our knees. Yes, I don't remember doing that after first or second grade, so you're talking probably by the early 70s we stopped doing those drills.
Do you recall Nancy Reagan's war on drugs?
Nancy Reagan started the war on drugs sometime in the mid-1980s. Don't remember much about it, but the phrase war on drugs has carried on through almost till today.
Was it widespread?
In the beginning, it was widespread. They took many initiatives and did many different things to try and combat the drug problem, but I'm not so sure that it really had any effect at all on the drug problem in the United States.
What drug do you think it tried to conquer the most?
Well, at the time, during the 1980s, cocaine was the most popular drug in the country, and it went after the cocaine kingpins and people dealing with cocaine.
Yes, I do remember it, and it did have a positive effect. Although a lot of people made fun of Nancy Reagan.
I vaguely remember Nancy Reagan's campaign against drugs, not very much. I don't think it was very effective. I don't think most things that the First Ladies do are really that effective. They got a lot of press.
Where were you when the Challenger exploded?
Coming in on a plane from New York to Puerto Rico at the San Juan airport, my husband told me over the phone.
I was on my way to a college class, to a graduate class. I found out about it. That had already happened. The professor walked in the room and started talking about the explosion as if we already knew what happened. I had no idea what happened, but I, like most other people in the class, was shocked.
Do you believe that Gorbachev and Reagan should have developed the working relationship that they did?
Yes, because eventually it led to the entire dismantling of the eastern part of Europe. Communism slowly fell, beginning in 1989 and through the early 90s. That ended it. And I think the big famous quote from Ronald Reagan was, "Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall," meaning the Berlin Wall. So, and he did.
Do you remember the Intermediate Range Nuclear Force Treaty of 1987?
The ICBM. There were so many of these treaties that were going back and forth during that period of time that most people in the United States didn't pay much attention to them because they just had fancy long names and they just didn't really have any care to learn any more about them.
Yes, I do. It would have been better for all concerned.
Did you ever feel pressure by the energy crisis and rising oil prices?
No, I never really felt pressure with the energy crisis because when the energy crisis was going on, I was younger, and if I did have to buy fuel, it was only for myself or my car, and I never remember my family or my parents really complaining too much about the energy crisis. I do remember having to wait online to buy gas to get the car filled up, but it didn't really have much of an effect on our lives.
Did you own a Japanese car?
No, we owned American-made cars, a Pontiac Catalina and some kind of Buick or Chrysler station wagon.
Do you know anyone that owned a Japanese car?
During the energy crisis, there were Datsun was the big car that was out, and there were people that owned Datsuns, which is now present-day Nissan, and yeah, they were around.
Where were you for the destruction of the Berlin Wall?
I was living in New York City at the time that the Berlin Wall came down. I remember it very well. It was on the news, and it was big news because the Berlin Wall was the ultimate symbol of communism, and it came falling down in one day.
Do you know anyone who was directly affected by it?
I don't know anyone who was directly affected by it, but I think that most people in the world were affected by it, not that day, but later on in life, in the following years after that, because the world became a different place.
What was your initial reaction to when it was torn down?
I couldn't believe it. No one could believe it. This wall had stood for 40 years, or I'm not sure 40 years, but it stood for quite a long time, and it was just something that happened overnight. It didn't happen in a month or whatever. Literally overnight, they crashed it down.
I was here in the United States during the destruction of the Berlin Wall, and actually that's a topic that I actually teach, or did teach at that time, and it was 10th grade global, so it was a very interesting time. and something that we were told would never happen, or under the impression that would never happen in our lifetimes.
I believe I was home, and my initial reaction was joy. I was really happy.
What are your feelings on the apartheid? Did you agree with how Congress prohibited further investments?
When apartheid was enforced, my feelings were that it was wrong and shouldn't be, and I was happy our government and other world governments got involved to put an end to it, because in the 20th century it's pretty silly to be separating people based on their races in such a developed country as South Africa.
Like most people, I was opposed to apartheid, and yes, I supported Congress and the government's stance against apartheid by not allowing investments in South Africa.
Do you agree with how the United States gave weapons to Iran to free the hostages?
I agree, because the ultimate goal was to get our American people back. What happened and took place during the Iran, I'm trying to think of the exact name of it, but hostages, arms for hostages is what it was known as during that time, was a little unethical and unorthodox, but in the long run, all the Americans that were held captive were released unharmed, and we got them back. Sometimes, as a government, we have to do things that are not normal in order to seek an end to a situation. So, yes, I agree with what happened with the arms for hostages deal.
Do you think Oliver North should have received prison time?
No, he shouldn't have received prison time, because he was acting on orders from above him. So he was doing what he was told, and a lot of debate on who told what and what happened with the whole situation. But the bottom line is that everyone made it back home alive, and that's the ultimate goal, to get all Americans back home.
Who else do you remember being at fault?
At fault for the arms for hostages? It was a tangled mess of names and people and finger pointing. Eventually it all blew over, but I don't remember specific people who were involved, but there were a lot of people involved. Just one guy can't go forward with an operation of this magnitude by himself.
I was happy that we got the hostages released. I wasn't too sure about giving them weapons, Iran weapons. And Oliver North was following orders that his government had given him. However, I think he should have gotten some kind of reprimand.
I think the Iran-Contra crisis or conflict is something that goes on all the time. We just don't hear about a lot of the behind-the-scenes activities that go on between both our friends and our enemies. I think Oliver North should have done jail time. Yes and no. Probably because he broke the law, but no, these things probably go on all the time. You just don't find out about it.